Welcome to Productly Speaking, the podcast that dives deep into the fascinating world of product management. I'm your host, Carl Abbott, and each episode I'll be bringing you conversations with some of the most innovative and inspiring minds in the industry. Together, we'll uncover their stories, insights, and the secrets behind their success. So whether you're a seasoned product manager or just curious about the field, join us for an entertaining and informative journey through the art and science of creating great products. Let's give it a go. On today's episode, we'll be talking to Adil Hussain, a product manager for the Financial Times who works to help aspiring product managers get started in the field. Adil's going to tell us how he got into product management and how that led him to want to help others. Adil's also spent time in both the public and private sectors, and so we'll discuss how product management practices differ between the two. We'll also talk about the UK's GDS, or Government Digital Service, and how that can be useful to product managers all over the world. Adil, it's great to have you on Productly Speaking.
Hey, Carl. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Glad to have you here. Tell us about how you got started in product management.
So I accidentally founded a bit of a startup when I was around 14, kind of school age, quite a lot of web development, marketing with my co-founder. We were just doing a lot of what you would call, I would say, product management now in today's time, but we were just doing a lot of analysis, requirement gathering, speaking to our users, trying to understand what they need and how, kind of playing the founder, the CEO role, all of that all together at once. That's kind of where I got into a little bit of a product role, but didn't know it was product at the time. Initially, we were doing a lot of that, the whole kind of building the gap between technology, business, user needs, etc. Fast forward, many, many years later, so that was kind of a couple of years, did that during school and study time. I then started working for a SaaS tech company about 7 or 8 years ago. And that's where I discovered, how software teams are run, what product management kind of is, just heard of the title. Worked quite closely with support team, sales team, account managers. So that was fun. That's where I first came across product. We had a product manager who was amazing, who turned out to be one of my first mentors, and I'll kind of go into that into a bit more detail. But kind of just looking at how product was done, it's when the penny dropped and I thought, oh wait, I've kind of done some of this before. So that was quite interesting. It's wait a minute, I've had these kind of discussions, balancing a lot of these different needs and different elements to building good products, even though I wasn't actually building a SaaS product. It was more of a methodology and a mindset. That's kind of where my first exposure to product came from.
Going back to that time period when you were 14 and talk about how you get into doing your own startup and you've got a co-founder and all of this, I can only imagine that this looks like you had found a problem that you saw a solution for and you're like, I could do that. And you've got a friend with you who says, yeah, let's do this. And then you go and you do that. And because you've already seen this problem and you know the problem well, and you're like, yeah, if we did this, it'd solve it. You just are going. You don't even really think about the fact that you're doing product or anything like that. And it's kind of interesting that, product management is this discipline where it really is about figuring out how things work and getting into the nitty-gritty details and tinkering. And once you have that type of love, it just goes from there. So tell me a little bit about that and how that really was kind of your first introduction to product, because it's not something you think about as product when you're in the middle of it.
Absolutely. No, you put it really well. I think even now, I come across people that I mentor, that I teach, or just have normal conversations with who aspire to break into product and who've maybe founded their own businesses, their own startups, don't realize that they're doing a lot of product style thinking. For me, especially when I first kind of went into the world of tech per se, it was about understanding user needs and building products, building sort of marketing campaigns, websites, whatever it was, according to what our client or user required. For me, it's one of the themes that you'll probably see across our chat. Product management for me is about solving those problems in the right way and also making sure that we're building really good user experiences. And that's been the key theme for me throughout my career as well, and especially my foundations and kind of where I come from and as I started my career in product. So it's always crucial. And I think, especially if you are a founder or, you have your own business or your own startup, identifying kind of the problems that your users have or your clients have and solving those is crucial to business as well. So it kind of forces you to think in that mindset of, okay, this is what my client needs or requires. This is where I can kind of pivot and suggest something different or make sure that we're providing the outcome that they're looking for so they're happy and they go away with a satisfactory service. And essentially, that's kind of how it scales up. And that's what we do in product day to day, right? As part of the wider job and the wider role. Although not to simplify it too much, I think that's one of the most crucial parts is always having a user at the heart of what you're doing.
So you got into roles that were actually called product. And now you're like, okay, this is what product is. Kind of tell me about the rest of your journey from that point forward.
As I mentioned, I started off at a software company. A little more formal exposure to how technology teams, software building works. And one day in one of my one-to-ones with my manager asked, where do you want to go? What do you want to be? And I instantly just said, product management. Didn't really know what the job entailed in sort of a professional setting, It's only now retrospectively that I'm telling you when I think back towards my younger school years and what that meant. But yeah, I just said, I want to do product management. And my manager was, is an amazing guy, still in touch with him, said, okay, let's go and chat to our product manager on the team. And this was pre-COVID. So everybody was in the office, everybody was kind of collaborating, communicating together in the same space. So the three of us got into a room, really tiny, sort of, 3-people room. And we just spoke for 20 minutes. And my PM at the time just kind of mapped out everything. This is what a product manager does. This is what the day-to-day entails. What do you think? Can you deal with this? And I just sat there yes, maybe. And I think that's leaving that room is where I thought, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. And that's when a lot of those pieces in my mind of the puzzle kind of started connecting. And then just observing day to day, like what the PMs, POs were doing on our teams really helped me understand and cement that this is where I want to be in terms of my career. There's a second sort of part to this as well in terms of my role at that company was more around customer support, sort of a consultant / customer support. So I was always at the front end kind of speaking to our users who are using our SaaS products and understanding, what their problems were, solving their problems, all the way from changing passwords to writing custom SQL queries. And there were so many occasions where I would pick up a call and we had our regulars and they were amazing and really nice users who would have these ideas and, enhancement requests and features and all of these things. But in my mind, I would put together this roadmap. If this product was mine at the time, I wouldn't say PM, but this is what I would do. This is how I would do it. And this is how we would maybe, help this person uncover that problem. So I think that's where my journey kind of started and where I started actively looking for a product role to kind of go into and test the waters with.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, I also come from a customer support background before getting into product management. It really does give you a perspective on customer needs and how customers use a product and just understanding that there's 100 ways to use a product, not just the 1 or 2 ways that you have in your product features deck where you tell people all about your product.
No, absolutely. 100% I agree with that. There's just so many different types of users that we have to consider and balancing a lot of those, making those priority calls in terms of what's next for the product, but what will also be beneficial to our users. And I think even now in today's day and age, when there's so many alternatives to your product and competitors in the market, it's about how do you stand out and how do you also meet those needs to make sure that you're an exemplar product.
And then there's the times where you get a request that you just have to say no to because that's not the direction that you want to go.
That's it. Sometimes easier said than done. And also, depending on where you are in the business, like for me, when I was working in customer support, it was so easy. It was like, yeah, we'll make a note of that. And then it will go into the backlog and never be seen again. And then a year down the line, somebody will call up and say, oh, remember that thing that I requested a year ago? Like, where is it? But now when you're in that driving seat, it's a lot more difficult to do. Yeah.
Well, the more customers you get, the bigger your backlog becomes and the more that becomes a thing, because at some point you're looking at, we've got 300 feature requests and we can't do 300 feature requests. So we've got to prioritize. And unfortunately, the 10 that we picked to do over the next year, they're going to be happy about it. But the other 290 are going to be like, why is my thing not getting worked on?
Exactly. And I think it's also important that we are mindful about how we share or how you break that news about saying no. From my experiences, like some users are less vocal than others. Some are more understanding, others maybe not. Some may require a little bit more convincing. Generally, being able to tell good stories as a product manager and being able to tell a narrative and kind of explain where you're getting to in simple terms, as we all know, it's very, very important.
Yeah, that storytelling is something that I like to talk about and think about, because ultimately, if you can tell a good story and you can communicate that this is the story we've got and make that really well with the customers and future users, et cetera, you're going to see a lot of pickup. That message is going to land a lot better than if it's just no story, or the story's bad. Yeah. Being able to tell more of a story about why this is not going to be done. What is your why? What is your purpose? Why is this not a good fit for this product right now at this product's life cycle? And hence why we're not going to go down that direction. And then is there another direction that we would go down that may be complementary?
Absolutely. I think for me, and it's quite common practice, again, it's easier said than done, is having that stance of sort of no, but just no for now. It's not always a hard no. And if it is a hard no, then this is why. But maybe we can look at this in 6 months, a year, 2 weeks, whatever it is, or we're not saying that your opinion doesn't count. Relationship management is a big part of that communication piece, and it's part of that narrative piece as well. I think it's very important.
And we've talked about feature planning and communications and relationship management and requirements gathering and all sorts of things already. You can't do all these things every day. And I think one of the things that I like most about this job of product management is that almost no 2 days are alike. Has that been your experience as well, or?
100%. I think this was one of the things that I was told very early on, like that meeting that I had between my manager and PM and myself was never expect 2 days to be the same. I think every day I sit down before I start my workday, look at my calendar, and there will always be different things to be thinking about, to juggle. You never know what that next Slack message is going to be or from who. I think the interesting thing for me is, especially around the point of 2 days not being the same, is I work. So at the moment, I'm at the FT, the Financial Times. I don't own a product per se. I'm not a conventional SaaS product manager where I have this particular feature that is in my team's ownership, or I have this its entire product that is resting on my shoulders. The FT, we have many different teams that will input into digital subscription experiences as just one small part of a huge wheel. So there will be different teams, responsible for different parts of the product or different parts of the experience. A team responsible for subscriber acquisition, and I'll be responsible for, subscriber retention, which has happened. Or, currently I'm working on the homepage experience, and there's many different teams who have input and say into how things are done, and how the estate, as we call it, is kind of split across. So it's a lot of collaboration. And because of that, you can't make decisions on your own always. There could be lots of dependencies, which means your day is always very different. You're juggling lots of different things. You're speaking to people. And there's also so many other parts of just product management itself, in terms of like looking at data, user interviews, processing those interviews, doing some opportunity mapping. So it's always fun, keeps me on my toes.
That's interesting that you bring up that you don't have a specific product. You're in charge of an experience across a variety of products, which I find that interesting because I'm in a role kind of similar where I don't have one particular product. I'm spread across a whole ecosystem of products. And in fact, I'm spread across a partner ecosystem of partner products on top of our product. And so it's, there's no sense of like the traditional product management of I have an engineering team and we're going to deliver these features this month. It's really a much bigger thought pattern. And I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts on, are roles like these becoming kind of more the norm? Is that kind of where product management is going, and kind of away from that, let's crank out 5 features for this product over the next few months?
Yes, 100%. This is a really great topic. What I'm seeing is more and more companies are emphasizing that teams, especially engineers, engineering managers, designers, data analysts, whoever it is that's embedded in your team, takes on more responsibility for the product. That means a product manager is given that capacity and time and space to think more strategically, especially if you're in an enterprise setting where, let's face it, a lot of the times, user experience is crucial, but also you're thinking about revenue and how we're generating a lot of that, or how we're retaining our user base, or, looking at those very high level business kind of decisions and inputting into those that make really big impact away from the day-to-day product management. And I think especially within the market that we're currently in, a lot more of that is required from the PM. For example, with my team, I encourage my team to do a lot of the ticket writing, day to day. We don't have product owners at the FT. The product manager would have to do a lot of the tactical work and also a lot of the strategic thinking as well. Again, I think it depends very much on what kind of a product manager you are and what kind of an organization that you're working in. I generally see a pattern of more autonomy for the team, write out those tickets, understand the estimation of the work, kind of build out certain features, and then the product manager is overseeing that, thinking about more of the strategy, more of the revenue, what's coming next, the roadmap at a higher level. So I think that's really important as well.
It's really interesting to see how the field has evolved and how it keeps changing and how it's going to arguably continue to change, because I don't think it's going to be a stagnant field by any stretch.
Absolutely. And I think especially with the introduction of AI, there's a lot more a product manager generally now has at their disposal to be able to do a lot of this kind of thinking, where we might have more tactical ground level work being automated or shared across the team. A lot of this workload is being dispersed to give that space to the product manager to innovate. I think that's a crucial thing, Organizations, businesses, enterprises now want innovation at a faster, more rapid scale to keep up with the demands of the evolving industry, keep up with the demands of what AI can produce and what it can do for us. I think we've just massively kind of accelerated. And then now the PM has to kind of keep up with that, is also my thinking. There's also the other more darker side of what, a lot of people shy away from talking about is, again, the market situation and a lot of redundancies happening, roles being cut, teams being shrunk, and that's putting more onto the PM. And then again, that's where you either distribute some of the more tactical work that a PM would do, or you just take it on and you utilize AI and you kind of do that whole package. So that's also something else that I've noticed.
Yeah, that's definitely out there for sure. Very interesting to see how far we can push AI, because when AI is right, it's amazing. And we're all like, wow, that was really cool. I got that done fast. And when it's wrong, it's really wrong. And there's some things that AI is really good at. Like, I'm going to give you a paragraph of text that I wrote, but I don't want to spend the time to make my next draft myself, improve it for me. AI is pretty good at this, but then do my research for me, write me a PRD. It may get 70, 80% of the way there, but you still have to check the work. And realistically, it's kind of like a fancy template at this point where, okay, yeah, you could have had a PRD template that you just filled out yourself, or you can ask AI to generate one for you. And it's kind of like, okay, that's about the level of where you've gotten. So I think we have to be very realistic about what AI actually can do versus what people wish it did.
Yeah, 100%. I think at the moment, from my own personal experiences, I'm a very pro AI, love what it can do, but I see it from a lens of productivity. Exactly what you said, help me write these tickets out, user stories, something that I can do, but it might take me an hour to do 5, 6, 7, whatever many tickets, but AI can do it for me in a minute, 2 minutes. I recently had a project at the FT that I was working on with my team. And one of the things that, is a perfect use case was to ask ChatGPT and kind of AI to help understand certain data sets and, group certain data sets together so we can change however things were personalized on screen for our digital experiences. Very quickly, I noticed it started hallucinating. Right? If I gave it an Excel spreadsheet of 50 different topics, 100 topics, or whatever it is, it would start entering in data, or it would start removing data. So the reliability is not there. But I think, again, use it as a crux for productivity where you can. The other thing, for example, what's new now is Lovable and Bolt doing a lot of this rapid prototyping, or what we're calling is vibe coding. Super useful, but 20 minutes in, I just realized this wouldn't go beyond just a prototype that I could show to my stakeholders to kind of help them envision what a product or what a iteration or a design could look like. It very easily started to crumble when you kind of went into the weeds of the code. So yeah, I think it's still early days, but use it for productivity and communication and collaboration where you can.
Talking about things like Lovable and some of the other products that are basically out there to build code for you with AI, you just tell it what your end state is, and depending on how much you know about code, maybe you give it a couple of parameters in here, and then you get out the other end a working application ready to go, which is an amazing promise. It's an amazing idea, but you have to be very mindful of the training data that's going into these language models that are generating all this code, and you have to be a little bit concerned, at least, that every single app's going to start to look and feel the same after a while, because the model's going to keep spitting out basically the same thing. To some degree, there's like this idea that we should unify interfaces, and that way you only have to learn like one interface, but this stifles creativity. And if you just depend on a model that's had training data and we stop creating, well, we're never going to get new creative data for the model to be trained on anyway. So at some point, that human creativity, I think, is just so key to the process. And like you said, yeah, you can get to a good start. It's great for a prototype or to say, hey, this is the idea. It helps you tell that story. Here's a visual of what I'm thinking. So I don't have to sit here and try and tell you in words. I can show you, here's what I'm thinking of. This is a similar type of flow, and you can use it for that type of thing, and it'd be amazing. For that, being able to say, AI, generate me a prototype that does the following 10 things. And it's ready. That's wild.
It's crazy. I mean, and I love the point that you just mentioned about still needing that human creativity and input to not have generic output, essentially, from any model. You see these posts online on social media. Oh, is this the end of product managers? AI is taking over the product manager's job. It most certainly is not. Exactly in what you mentioned just now. Like, I could give it a 2-line prompt and it will build me something that will be the same for everybody else. But what I noticed is you need to speak to it like a product manager to be able to get exactly what you want. So with Lovable, for example, I tried it, I gave it a few prompts, and it just created something completely out of whack, from what I wanted. And it makes sense, right? It will just use what you've inputted to process it. But if I used ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is to create like a PRD, and break down, those features, create some user stories, and then fed it that, the results were day and night. Like, they were completely different. So that kind of product style thinking is not there in the AI, but it's always needed. So I think it's very important.
Very cool. So you teach and lead aspiring product managers. Tell me about how you got started doing that.
For me, community is a big thing. It's a big part of one of my personal values and personal pillars in terms of where I stand within my career and also within product. When I first got into product, I had some very good mentors. I went out of my way to kind of speak to people, kind of build those relationships, understand product from different lenses, from different industries, and building up kind of that network of mentors that I had, all whom were very supportive, very generous with their time. And I noticed that about people generally in product are kind of like that all around. But for me, it was about giving back. So I had that good experience and I wanted to do the same. I love being part of communities, tech communities, inside work, outside of work. And I would always come across aspiring PMs, people who see product management as being a very soft skilled, focused career initially, your first impression, compared to maybe being an engineer or a data analyst or whatever it might be. There was always very common questions that I would come across, or, I would identify common patterns, certain pitfalls, reoccurring patterns and questions around the product industry. So for me, it was all about making my experiences and my knowledge accessible to those people, no matter who they are, just helping them along their journey. And once I did that a couple of times, it was something that I really enjoyed. And so I thought, hey, let's continue this. In terms of teaching, something that came to me initially, teaching product to these aspiring junior PMs. I did a very high level kind of intensive course, very slide heavy a few years ago. And that's where I really enjoyed it. Kind of giving back, helping out these aspiring PMs, and then just took it one step further, really. So now I run my own boot camp. For me, the thing that I focus on, helping people to understand product from an application point of view, a real world, real life application, rather than just the theory, And I always say to people that I mentor or that I speak to, that it's really easy for you to go online and read on LinkedIn and on X, and there's so much great content out there. But that doesn't always apply to you and your scenario. It's not always reflective of what real product management is. Going back to the point that you mentioned about 2 days are never the same. What do those 2 different days look like? What are you getting yourself into? So for me, and kind of the way that I do a bit of my teaching is around helping people to understand those unique scenarios. You've said no, but your stakeholder is pushing back. What do you do? Your team is resistant to estimating pieces of work, or your team is resistant to being onboarded onto your vision for a certain feature that you have. What do you do? Those are the scenarios that people are not prepared for. And I think for me, it's really important that you learn the basics. Absolutely. That's very important about product. There's certain things, frameworks, etc. But that's not what product always is. It's not just, I know how to use Rice, or I know how to create a roadmap. I can use Monday.com or whatever it is. that's not product. There's so many different moving parts to it. And I always want to make sure as much as I can, do my little tiny part and help people go away thinking like a product manager and not just kind of regurgitating theory.
I really like how you called out all the content that's out there on the internet. Certainly things like this podcast are adding to that level of content that's out there. But just because something works at Google doesn't mean it's going to work for you at your company unless you happen to be at Google. There's just a lot of things that are written from perspectives that this worked for me in this time at this place. And you're right to call out that it's not necessarily going to work for the person reading it in the space that they're at. But it's still good to have and to know that, okay, this worked like this over here, but it's not always one-to-one applicable.
Exactly that. I think it's a double-edged sword, right? So Google or like the big tech points of view is refreshing to see because it's constantly keeping you on your toes as a PM. I might read a post about how somebody is running a workshop to kickstart a new product from a discovery perspective and how they onboard their stakeholders and their teams. I might scroll up a couple of posts and somebody else is doing it completely differently. And I'm always thinking, oh, wow, that's a new angle to things. I could add, and it's you're kind of borrowing from a lot of that content, a lot of those experiences that are out there. You're building onto your craft, onto your product experience in this way. But I think for people who are into their careers, that's amazing. But if you're very new or very junior, I think that's where you should focus on, those real life scenarios and applications whilst balancing the theory. And then when you're more comfortable, go crazy, listen to all the podcasts, read all the books, and do all of that stuff. It's always really useful.
You mentioned you run a boot camp. How would a listener get connected with you to join that boot camp if they were interested?
So at the moment, it's sort of like an ad hoc basis. We do a couple of cohorts a year as well. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can have a chat. I'm always really keen to understand individuals' needs. And for me, the big one is always why product. It's something that I always encourage people to understand and to ensure that they have an idea of why. Because product for me is a career that's sort of a long game. It's quite a niche role. You have to really be invested into it to be able to do well. And it's not always black and white, like maybe engineering could be. So for me, understanding why people want to do it, what they want to achieve out of it, and just having a bit of a chat, and then I can share more about the boot camp itself. I'm pretty open. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can take it from there.
Excellent. So how would you say teaching aspiring product managers has helped you grow as a product manager?
I think generally anywhere in the world, when you're teaching, it helps you kind of deconstruct your own practices and understand them in a really clear, digestible way. So for me, when I'm teaching somebody about how to build a roadmap or how to go through a discovery process, I'm also in the back of my mind thinking, scrutinizing my process or my own knowledge and understanding and making sure that, is that exactly how I would do it? Whilst I'm also teaching it. So that's really important for me. And it also helps me to enable the refining of those processes, making sure that, as I'm teaching, we're withstanding any real world applications that might go into. And again, it's not just a theory or a page in a book. So that's one in terms of growth is, reinforce those principles for me. I think the other is around communication and leadership. It's very important, especially when I first started this. Really helps you to clearly structure out, okay, today we're going to talk about this. I'm going to spend 20 minutes on the first part of the topic. We're going to have a break. Then I'm going to make sure we go through the rest of this. I've got this, time slot, etc. It really helps me break down that complex thinking of product generally into simpler terms. Oftentimes, I've had students where I would run through backlog prioritization, what does deep mean, for example? And students will just look at me with like a blank face, like they have no idea, no context. And that's what happens. We throw around these buzzwords and it's so normal for us as PMs where it's alien to somebody who's completely new coming into this. So being able to break the most simplest things down into being even more simpler, and that communication is really important and something that I think has really helped me develop that across my time teaching. So that's also been really crucial. And then there's always, the reflection and self-improvement in terms of my own craft.
It's really, really interesting to just kind of see how doing that, how giving back to that community has given you the opportunity to be reflective on your own spot in it and how you practice on it. And I can definitely see how that would help you grow because you're constantly, like you said, questioning how you do things. And is it the right thing? Is it what you want the future of product management to look like? Or, hey, maybe we should change how we're doing this. And so this is today. This is why this other thing would be better, and having those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've worked in both the private sector and the public sector. How is product management different between the two? Because I suspect there's a lot of similarities, but we've talked before and there are some differences.
Yes, there are. This is a really interesting topic, and it's something that doesn't always come to light or isn't always spoken about, is that especially in the UK here, and for those listening who are based in the UK, we have a very strong public sector or government product community and practice. My first role as an associate product manager was within government, within the Department for Education. My values and kind of what I stand for are like good experiences, solving problems, and also building communities and helping communities. A lot of that comes from those foundations, and I feel really lucky to be able to start my career in a place where product is really solid, really amazing people, good practice. And there was a ground for kind of growth and experimentation that I was a part of that really helped me build up those solid foundations for the rest of my career. Now that I'm more into enterprise and the commercial sector, there are lots of differences. In the public sector, the key catalyst to building products is cultural transformation. I use that as a broad term that would encompass things like technical transformations. There's a lot of legacy systems within the public sector, user services, user needs, kind of making sure we meet those, being able to ensure that we are accessible with our products and services to our users. It's really important. Kind of a bit of a side story. So a couple of weeks ago, my mum and I were kind of chatting about passports. Hers was out of date and it needed renewing. And it was like, oh, we need to do this. We need to get it done. It's another life admin job and it will take us days and days. And there was this kind of sense of panic, and we'd have to get the form and then we'll have to fill the form out and send the form out. And I realized, I think the last time my mom did something like this was many, many years ago, where you'd go to the post office and you'd pick up one of those forms and you'd fill them out. And then it was only after she finished ranting was when I kind of said, well, it'll just take me 10 minutes online. And your passport will be here like in 2 weeks. And that's exactly what we did. So now it's one of the best services that we have in the UK. Is this service to kind of apply for a UK passport, get one urgently, or, renewing it, and it takes 10 minutes. Perfect online service. Perfect example of, what good products.
I'm jealous. I wish we had that here.
It's amazing. The UK has a really good government digital service.
Tell us about the UK's government digital service and how any product manager in the world can use that as a resource to help get their job done better.
You might have heard of gov.uk. That's kind of our main brand, right? It's where the services are built and how they're launched. So gov.uk is open source. It's all about reusable components, accessibility, world leader, I would say, in building public services, government digital service. What's really interesting is that the government digital service, so GDS, supports over, I think, 1,600 live websites globally. There's been a massive influence on some of the key government digital services across the world. So USWDS, the United States Web Department, I want to say, a web design system, is heavily influenced and draws from gov.uk. Canadian Digital Service is based heavily on the same. The Italian government's design system is also based on GDS design patterns. So it's a very kind of all-encompassing, this is what we stand for, accessibility, user needs, user services. It's a whole manual that anybody can access online, and it's what we use to kind of build our services on. And there's a lot that it can go through. It's a if it was a book, it would be humongous. It would be volumes and volumes. It talks about good agile practices, design. So we have a very thorough design library that's used across all of our public services on gov.uk. We talk about how best to do prototyping, how to build design patterns, and that's where a lot of these governments I've mentioned have kind of drawn inspiration from. We do something in the public sector in GDS called service assessments. So when you are building these public services or online products, you have to go through a standard, which is, I think it's like 13 or 14 points. And you go through an assessment to make sure that you meet those points to be able to ensure that this product is fit for purpose. one of the things around government services, especially in the UK, is it's very centered around user needs. We have to build products that are not just for our most tech-savvy users. So if I go back to the point about my mum and renewing the passport, although I kind of did it anyways, it should be built in a way where my mum can go online and click through and kind of do a lot of these things herself and gain the desired outcome that's needed in minutes or in a very easy way. So that's how all products are built on gov.uk, and it's very, very important. It's crucial. There's huge amounts to go through here, even with capabilities, right? Product managers, delivery managers, or / Scrum Masters, user researchers. There are frameworks around how this is what we're looking for in an associate PM. This is what a head of product should be doing. What kind of level of skill do they need, and how should they be working towards that? So it's very set out, especially a lot of these benchmarks, frameworks, building services. I see it as a 360. So it's always giving people, especially in tech and government, a reference to work back towards, build towards a certain standard, and also make sure that services are scalable. They're all built on the same stack. Anybody can come in and pick up somebody else's service or product and kind of take ownership, because it's very well thought out, which I think is excellent the way that it's done.
No, that's really cool. I had no idea that the UK had such a resource. Yeah, it's available to anybody. So that's really cool. Definitely drop a link to that in the show notes for this episode.
Amazing. No, I definitely will do. And I just want to point out, I think I mentioned this to you, Carl, before this podcast in our last catch up, the profession capability framework. I introduced that to Lenny a while back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
So he heard it first from me. But it's a great...
That's a good claim to fame.
Yeah, that's it, right? But no, I keep going back to service and that word, but it's very important within the public sector product building, because we think about services as the end-to-end experience, not just what does this slice of the product do, or what does this feature do, and we're not thinking about how it kind of joins up the user journey around it or other considerations. Service is kind of the heart and center of GDS and public service building.
Awesome. So Adil, one final question to help our audience get to know you a little bit better. What is one goal you hope to achieve in the next year?
Oh, that's a great question. Is that personal goal?
Can be. Personal, business, your choice.
I think it would probably have to be something to do with AI and being able to master AI in a way where it kind of excels my product thinking and product skill set to the next level. So we kind of briefly touched upon using a lot of these kind of Gen AI tools like Lovable, Bolt, whatever it is, to build prototypes, etc. But I want to incorporate that more into my workflow, and then also support the kind of organizations that I work for, the business, in terms of achieving their goals with the use of AI as a support tool, and having that level of technical knowledge beyond just being able to write a prompt and output a prototype. So I think getting more comfortable with AI and at a deeper level than just the surface.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Amazing. No, thank you. This has been great. Thanks, Carl.
This episode of Practically Speaking was brought to you by the letters P&M. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this podcast with your friends and anyone who loves a good story about product management. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Visit us at www.practicallyspeaking.com, drop us an email at hello@practicallyspeaking.com, or join the discussion on Matrix at #practicallyspeaking:matrix.org. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.